really what this message says. So I'm just going to read it and see if there's something. But it is titled Past Lives. Should be interesting. Hey Scott, I just had an interesting thing happen while doing these inquiries. I was inquiring into a belief about feeling worthless. Since I am not able to work due to illness, I had a very clear scene come up in my mind of an injured man and his family sleeping on the street in the snow and being beaten by a man in a top hat who was calling him a worthless poor person. He had injuries on his arm and leg and was wearing a sling. His family was huddled up under blankets trying to stay warm and were very dirty. It was during the Victorian period. This image was so clear, I have no idea if this was a real past life or something else, maybe ancestral trauma. I watched your videos about Mary. What did you do to work with her? Do you have any suggestions for working with the man? She's alluding to the fact that this feels like past life, and I shared in a video where I had two past life figures come up for me, Mary and another gentleman who remains nameless. Here's the thing, you don't have to believe in past lives to have these experiences. Even when they're coming up, they come up like any other thoughts, words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. But the difference is it feels like the figure and the events are not in your life. There's no way to get beyond that. There's no way, we don't have any scientific proof of past lives, as far as I know. So you have to just give these experiences the acknowledgement that they need, because if you get caught up in the debate whether it's a past life or just an unconscious thing in this life, you might miss the juice, the insight, and the realizations that can come. These are very powerful doorways into freedom in this life when we find a past life figure. Again, whether it's past life or not doesn't matter. It comes up to try to show us something. And if we're not skillful with it, it'll keep showing up until we integrate the meaning, the messages, whatever else. So she's asking for suggestions. The good thing is it already comes up, so you don't have to conjure it up. So when it comes up next, this gentleman, you're going to want to start mining that image. So the image of the gentleman there, see, there's a lot of programs in that. There's a lot of meaning, a lot of stories, usually quite a few. So you want to mine that out. Like, what does the image of this man mean about me? And then just witness through the meanings associated with that image. Keep going, witnessing, letting everything fall of every message that comes out of that image. I suggest you do that with any image in consciousness that's really sticky. Inner child, mine out, mine out, mine out. When you do that, you start to see the emptiness of the past life figure or the inner child. Emptiness just means there's really nothing there on that side. It's not a separate thing at all. It's just, again, words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. But if you don't see the words, then those words remain unconscious, the messages, the meanings. And in remaining unconscious, the image tends to reappear or be reified in your experience like it's real. So Mary stopped coming up when I did the mining. And strangely, she was giving me messages that were absolutely point on for my life. She was someone who did not repress anger, her anger towards men. So the her message was, I hate men, I'm angry, they don't want me. And these are feelings that I'd never let myself feel in this lifetime, of hatred and anger towards men being gay. So in owning that, it helped with the anger repression. It helped to lift the repression of anger in me as I owned that these programs that were not in my experience before, like being able to own hatred, anger. Couldn't do that. She could do that, but I couldn't. So mining out her image, suddenly now I can. My anger's not repressed. And so that I could process that. I couldn't process it as long as it was her issue. See that? So those past life figures come up with issues, but you can't process it for them. You can't go into their life. Well, you could do some inquiry like that, where you imagine them inquiring, but mainly they're there to show you things about your life. So mine out those images. It is really that simple. Yes, it would be worthwhile to conjure up the image again if you can. Just pull the image up and then start mining. You don't have to wait for it to come up. And let's see here. Here's another question. Just want to make sure it's something I can share. Okay, I'll answer it. Scott, I'm responding to your YouTube video from this morning. I have a history of childhood trauma. My response was varied, but one of the ways I chose to try to deal with it was a meditation practice that started when I was in my 20s. I studied A Course in Miracles, meditated every day, and have followed different inquiry traditions. I have deconstructed many of the ways I, as a child, developed beliefs velcroed to feelings and anchored in the body. One was that the world was unsafe, unpredictable, and I needed to find a way out of it. I followed the path of chasing enlightenment and began the search for a savior/teacher. I realized this around 10 years ago, and my response was to imagine that my teacher was angry with me, or completely ineffective, or disapproved of me, to see what that would kick up, and I would just try to sit with it. Until I ran into the Kilby inquiries a couple of years ago, I did not quite have all the pieces to engage in this inquiry work, and just sitting with it was really not uprooting it. Hear that? So, in case you think that I'm just full of crap when I say that, like sitting with this stuff when it's unconscious doesn't uproot it. There's someone who found that in her own experience. I was drugged when I was abused, and so this has been a tricky recovery. Because of the drugging and the ways the trauma has locked into the body, KI has really piqued my interest. 2 back surgeries, chronic pain, autoimmune disorder. Talk therapies through the years have been pretty useless. I have, over the past 2 years, been working with a somatic trauma-informed therapist who's also grounded in Buddhism and Hinduism. I had a glimpse experience 2 years ago and lived in bliss for a week or two. We'll circle back and focus more clearly on the teacher energy this week. Recognize even my pursuit of the Kilby inquiries has this energy to it. Yes, so I can see how a deficiency story is wrapped up into this, she asks. Here's a question. Have you or any of your facilitators worked with folks who were drugged? So that particular instance, I don't know, but we've dealt with lots of rape, child molestation, people who've been chased by serial killers, rapists, people who have been raped, for sure, but drugged, don't know, but I don't think it would change because how we process those events is the feelings that we have around them and the thoughts. A lot of times we just push them right down, and we do have thoughts and feelings around it. Fear, as you say, deficiency, traumatic responses. So it doesn't matter whether we've had that particular instance, we've dealt with this kind of thing of uprooting the particular programs and feelings that are repressed around something. We have ways of bringing that repression up now. So that's what I would say. Work with one of our facilitators. You can email me at kilbycenter@gmail.com, and I will recommend someone who has a lot of experience with abuse type situations. Maybe not being drugged, but so there's your answer. Okay. Yeah, this one I'm not going to answer. It's pretty thick. And that one's very personal. You guys send some really personal ones too, and I don't know if I want to. I mean, really personal. So if you send me a message, a question, make sure that you say in there whether it's okay to mention everything um, in your email before I just get on YouTube, because I assume that you guys are sending these in response to my request. But I want to make sure that you're not just sending that and not wanting it shared. Please let me know. There's some questions or comments. Would it be worthwhile to conjure up? I said answer that already. Okay, how to work with dreams. My partner has had some pretty wild dreams, and they were definitely connected to the unconscious and trauma that he was working on. So if you can get up in the morning and write down some of the details, the important details of your dream so that you record it. And then in inquiry, you use those relationships and just as if it were happening in real life. Like, so if in the dream you were being chased by your dad or something, you would treat that as a real event, like as it really happened, and inquire into it. So you might start with boomerang, like, okay, I'm being chased by dad. What's that mean about me? See, and then you start an inquiry and KI takes over. So that I'm not going to go through the whole process, but it's really no different working with dream material than it is waking material. There are important relationships and events that happen in the dream, and they mean something about you. And sometimes we can't see it until we inquire into the programs, the meaning, the feelings and thoughts there. So it's just treated as any other thing. It's not any different. The key is, do you remember the contents of the dream? So, Satya, when you're quoting Jeff's thing, that was a sarcastic quote. If you read the whole quote, he's saying all of that was bullshit that he said above that. So, in the post, I was just sharing about this in another video. In the post, he says there's really no such thing as suffering or trauma or depression. It's all a story in the ignorant mind. Once you see through all stories, you will no longer suffer. I never suffer anymore. He's not, he's being sarcastic when he says that. He's commenting on how teachings portray themselves that way at teachers as if they don't, even if they're suffering on some level. He's sharing how they're not honest. I think that's what the post is about. But I'll answer your question anyway. Do I agree? Everything is known and experienced through the mind. So trauma and depression, just like Santa Claus and Donald Trump, are known and experienced through thinking and feeling. So yeah, it's all a story in the human mind. All of it programs within the human mind. But until that's really seen, it's not that helpful. To see it as a story, to see it as just words or image, to feel it as just a feeling, to let it be. Um, that's when you see that it's a story. Then the insight comes, the realization that it's whatever you're suffering from isn't as real as you thought or isn't real at all. And when you see that, yes, then it's true. But he's not meaning that in a serious way. You see, it's kind of a play on words. So go read the post again. See if you can see that the second time. Well, yeah, if you see through all stories, what would you suffer over? See, there's some element of truth to it, what he's saying. Why do we suffer? Because we believe certain things. So if we don't believe those things, then would we really suffer? We might experience some pain here or there, but would we really suffer? I'm not talking about things that are physical diseases, not connected to the emotional or psychological. I'm saying those things that are emotional and psychological. So there's an element of truth to what he's saying. But I didn't talk to Jeff about that post, but my sense is he's talking about something else. He's not really talking about whether that's ultimately true. He's talking about how when teachers don't break the fourth wall, when they don't share honestly about where they are, and instead they give these statements that make people believe something, whether it's true or not breaking the fourth wall. See, like that's what he's talking about, I think, more than anything in that post. Yeah, good time, buddy. So you can see how dreams are helpful. Mind is quiet. Just want to sit here with me in silence. I have a few minutes. Sacha discovered what I was. She went back and read Jeff's post. She can see now what he was in sarcasm. Thank you, Sacha. I know that some people are listening to the videos and not quite diving deep into the work. I know that there are a certain amount of people who are listening to me that they're doing the work. And so I know that different categories of people come here, different places. And all I can do is, so I think that there's a value in just listening because eventually it pulls you into inquiry. So just listen for a while. But eventually that's where all these talks are going. It's kind of inviting back to inquiry. So I would say that if you just keep coming back just to listen to me gab, maybe there is a bypass going on there. Maybe. And that's okay. Because we all bypass and we all resist certain things. But I think where the rubber meets the road is when we really start to acknowledge it to ourselves first. So at least we're not lying to ourselves. If you can just be honest and say, I'm clearly not wanting to look at this, and this, then we're at least honest. And then when we're ready to look at those things, it'll happen. Meanwhile, a lot of what I feel like I do in these talks is kind of back the self into a corner, right? Back the repressions and the trauma into a corner where you have to really look at them and see that they are relevant, like to your life, like pointing out scenarios, patterns, and just, yeah, that's how I see it. Just backing the self into a corner where it's almost at some point you don't really have a choice anymore. It's like when you start to really see it, the picture that I'm painting around the embodiment process and things in the body, then eventually I think the suffering will get so acute or more acute, because to be aware of something and then to not look at it is painful. It's probably easier to deny that something is there, right? For me, it was easier to just deny that I had anger repression, and it was full on denial. So I know about bypassing. That's why I can't judge you, Satya. But to full on denial, I wasn't even open to the idea that I was repressing anger. But sooner or later, I got backed into a corner around it. I was forced to look at it. So there's probably areas in your life, Satya, that are like that. Like, your relationship with your dad or your mom was critical for the development of your programmed ego, and you know that there's things to look at, but it can be scary. Here, the good thing is, I want to remind you guys again, we're still working on moving to the new platform. So Satya and people like Satya who are coming here and maybe doing a little bit of bypassing, a little bit of holding out and waiting, you're welcome to come there too. But I think with a new platform, you're going to find more support to start looking. You're going to find that we're here every day, facilitators talking to you, interacting with you, doing more live meetings. And with that more support, it might feel safer to start looking, if that's what it is. Yeah. When I made you top fan, you thought you were enlightened. That's funny. Should I stop? Should I not come on YouTube for a while so you can go into inquiry? Well, just remember, for any of you who find yourself coming back just to listen, that's okay. But the new forum, again, you're going to be around people who are looking. You're going to see it, because when I get on video in the new forum, it's not going to be like this. It's going to be like suggesting inquiries to you, and then you look at them, you look at that, and then you come back and share and suggest more to you. So you much more process, much more engagement. Maybe then it'll feel safer to look at that. So join me. That's coming around the 1st.